1 year later, since Arkansas's first COVID-19 case reported at Jefferson Regional Medical Center in Pine Bluff, Governor Asa Hutchinson quickly declared a state of emergency, and cases began to multiply. Just 10 days later, March 24th, the first COVID-related deaths in Arkansas. The seriousness of this virus was taking hold, not only of our health, but of so much more. Everyone began to adapt. The everyday life we all knew was really beginning to change. April 4th, at least 20,000 Arkansans had applied for unemployment, and 2 days later, Governor Hutchinson announced that schools would close for the remainder of the school year. Flattening the curve was taking a lot longer than the world hoped, and in Arkansas, COVID-19 continued to take a toll. On July 20th, a mask mandate was put in place for the state of Arkansas. September 15th, we surpassed 1,000 COVID-related deaths. December 14th, the first highly anticipated COVID-19 vaccine was administered in Arkansas. And just 6 days after Christmas, we saw the highest one-day case count ever, 4,304. Vaccines continue to be administered. Precautions continue to be in place. Tonight, we look back at a year that some may call the lost year, but we've learned so much. We've grown together, even though so many of us are physically apart. With so much loss, so much change, we look back to look forward. This is Arkansas, 1 year later.
That's TV 11 storyteller Jesse Amos setting the stage for why we are here tonight. I'm Craig O'Neill, and we're glad you have joined us. Can you believe it's been a year? March 11th, 2020, the day it all shifted. Most of us remember exactly where we were when we heard the news and realized something big was happening. Our Hayden Balgavy takes us back to that night through his eyes.
March 11th, 2020 began just as it was supposed to. For me, it was a live shot. Good morning, everybody. It is finally time to play a little basketball. I'm Hayden Balgavy in Nashville. Throughout the day, there were conversations about the coronavirus, but fans seemed unfazed.
It's just if you take the precautions and you do what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's only 1,000 of them so far have been diagnosed.
Caution signs and tips on washing hands were visible, but the tournament was still full go, and the Razorbacks had a must-win game against Vanderbilt.
Awesome. Yep, great practice, great energy.
The energy transferred to the ballgame that night. Hogs jumped all over the Commodores in front of thousands of screaming fans. But just minutes into this basketball game, everyone's attention was suddenly elsewhere.
The NBA has suspended its season after a player tested positive for COVID-19.
The NBA was done, but there were still live hoops going on in Nashville. Arkansas beating Vanderbilt to advance to the next round of the SEC tournament. I actually broke the news to Razorback Desi Sills that the NBA season was on hiatus.
So the NBA season suspended now because of the coronavirus. What was your reaction?
Man, that's crazy, but at the end of the day, they NBA players, they're professionals, they got to do what they do.
Texted with a couple of my buddies that are with some teams, and there's just kind of shock throughout not just basketball world, but just kind of shock with everybody.
The following morning, the Southeastern Conference followed in the NBA's footsteps.
To make a recommendation to our presidents and chancellors that we cancel the remainder of our men's basketball tournament was a moment where I had to stop and actually catch myself and recompose myself.
From a packed arena to a ghost town in less than 24 hours.
You know, the air is out of the balloon. It's just a little deflated.
Just like us, fans were heading back to Arkansas with no idea the unprecedented year we were all about to face.
But we're vertical, we're alive, we're healthy, and, praise God, there's tomorrow.
Never forget that night, and many people have reflected recently about the last normal thing they did before COVID hit, the last time they went to a ball game or flew on a plane or ate at a restaurant. We asked you to tell us about your last normal memories. Laura from Benton sent us these pictures. She was at that SEC tournament in Nashville watching the Hogs before everything was called off. And Vicki from Maumelle sent us this picture of her and her friends at a concert at Verizon Arena not long before COVID hit. She told us she never dreamed we would reach a pandemic and not be able to gather in large crowds for over a year. You know what? If you want to share your pre-COVID memories, text them to us at 501-376-1111, and we'll share more coming up. Now, we can't talk about COVID without talking about the people on the front lines who have risked and sacrificed so much to take care of us this year. Tonight, our Amanda Yeager sits down with 4 Arkansas healthcare workers to talk about what's on their minds and hearts 1 year later and what they want you to know moving forward.
How are you feeling now? When you hear COVID 1 year later, what is your initial emotion towards that?
I think shocked that it's been a year. I don't think anybody expected that we would be still dealing with this pandemic this far along.
Exhausted. It's been one heck of a year, but I will say I am so proud of healthcare workers across the world. They have banded together, they have risen to the challenge, and we should be so proud of what we've accomplished.
You know, we've come through so much to get to where we are now. We have a light at the end of the tunnel in our vaccines, but unfortunately there's still an awful lot of darkness around it.
You know, we feel like we have learned a lot and we've come through a lot and we're not at the end yet. We need to keep on fighting.
Are there any patient stories or fellow medical professional stories that really stand out to you, that really impacted you?
March or April of last year, we had a woman coming through the drive-through to be tested for COVID. I went through our screening questionnaire and I said, you know, you've got symptoms, you potentially have been exposed, we need to test you for COVID. She broke down in tears. She said, I don't want to die, I'm not ready to go.
Multiple family members that had, had a small get-together for Mother's Day because the matriarch of their family was pretty old and, they didn't want to lose that opportunity. And, several generations of that family ended up becoming sick. And, talking to them, you could feel the weight of the guilt, and trying to let them know that they didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't their fault.
Obviously, the devastating loss of life from COVID. As medical professionals, what is the greatest challenge you've faced this last year?
We had no idea how to treat it, how to really prevent it. And so that led to a lot of confusion, not just among our employees or healthcare workers, but really our public, because it seemed like messages were changing hourly and daily. And it wasn't because we didn't know what we were doing, it's we were working with the information that we had.
The human aspect of it. Every one of us, have families that we're taking care of, we have our own challenges, and feeling the weight of that was a lot. I think that was, for me, the most difficult part of all of this.
I think the change in workflow, when you consider the loss of family members at the bedside, the impact they have to make patients feel better and just to understand what's going on is huge.
What are your greatest concerns as we move into another year, and also your greatest hopes?
We've got to continue to do our public health measures. I know it's hard. I know people are tired with it. I'm tired with it.
I think my biggest fear is just like everyone else is that we will be back here in a year or that this will kick back off.
To use a football analogy, we're in the red zone. Now's not the time to take out your starting quarterback. You don't celebrate until you cross the goal line.
I see this as probably the equivalent of my being in a war. Because from a healthcare standpoint, this was a war. And I think as long as we can continue to make a difference for the lives of our families, our community, our state, our country, that's why we're here.
Everyone on that panel stressed the importance of getting vaccinated and sticking to public health recommendations like wearing masks and social distancing. Healthcare workers were in the first group of Arkansans to qualify for the COVID vaccine. Also in that group, people living and working in nursing homes or long-term care facilities. One of the most sobering statistics of the pandemic is that more than 30% of Arkansas's reported deaths happened inside these facilities. Some of our most vulnerable friends and family members lost to this virus. Thankfully, nearly every staff member and resident have now been vaccinated. There's one aspect to this virus that still remains a mystery 1 year later. People are struggling with symptoms and health issues long after being diagnosed with COVID-19. Doctors call them long haulers. THV 11's Melissa Zikowicz shows us how experts are trying to solve these mysteries.
I went into the hospital actually on Thanksgiving Day.
And more than 100 days later, Heidi Charton is still experiencing symptoms of COVID-19.
I really have to make my health my first priority.
Charton is what doctors consider a long hauler. Her symptoms like fatigue, distorted taste and smell, and a cough have yet to go away.
I have to use an inhaler now.
And new ones, including brain fog and hair loss, have since popped up.
It's just really disheartening.
But the most frustrating, Charton cannot find any answers as to why this is happening.
What do I do about the hair falling out? Is this going to be a permanent thing?
So we don't exactly know, but all we have is hypotheses.
Dr. Nikhil Meena is an associate professor at UAMS in the Department of Immunology. One hypothesis is that COVID-19 causes small blood clots in the brain, causing issues weeks or even months later.
So it's certainly an intriguing phenomenon.
Some of the most common symptoms in long haulers include brain fog, shortness of breath, and fatigue. Dr. Meena has even seen patients struggle with mood disorder and depression.
It's common even in the patients who were never even in the hospital.
It's become so common. UAMS is in the beginning stages of opening up a clinic for long haulers.
The main goal of the clinic is going to be to provide support and help.
Research will be a secondary part of this clinic, so doctors can find better answers as to why COVID-19 affects certain people this way.
Some patients would obviously be enrolled in trials.
Patients like Charton will be grateful for any answers because for them, COVID-19 didn't end after the 2-week quarantine. It's a battle with no end in sight.
And in my case, it's been 4 months. So wear your mask.
In Little Rock, Melissa Zikowicz, THV 11 News.
Through the stories of loss and struggle, there are stories of miracles. Our Jordan Howington sat down with a Conway couple who saw the worst sides of this pandemic and came out the other side with a new perspective on life.
It was hard to keep hope, really, but we did.
Life got scary for Chuck and Camille Turchi on Christmas Day. He tested positive for COVID with no underlying health issues, but began declining rapidly.
Well, it was tough because, my world stopped and the rest of the world just kept going on.
This was his reality minutes before heading to the ER. Doctors told his family had he waited any longer to get there, he wouldn't be here talking with us today.
I didn't know if he was going to make it because they didn't know if he was going to make it.
For nearly 2 weeks, Chuck fought for his life on a ventilator. His wife, Camille, unable to be there, received updates through FaceTime. Life didn't look promising for her husband. He had double pneumonia and he was septic. The doctors even bringing a priest in to pray over him.
We had so many friends and family praying for him.
But on day 10 of his fight, Chuck shocked doctors. He suddenly began weaning off the vent, something he hadn't been able to do his entire stay. And it surprisingly got better and better until he woke up and he was off of it.
Dr. Tyrone Lee is the doctor who took care of me, who basically, he did save my life, there's no doubt.
Chuck and Camille have been home now for 2 months. They say life is simply different in a good way.
Oh, it changed a lot as far as what's important and obviously what's not important.
I'm ready to retire.
Time. It's time with family and loved ones they've learned is so fragile. And from this point forward, the Turchis plan on pulling the reins back. On work, on stress, on life, slowing down and enjoying life from their new perspective.
Money's not the most important thing in the world. It's enjoying life and enjoying people and enjoying your friends. We've always enjoyed getting together with folks, cooking and doing that, but to me, it even means a lot more now.
The pandemic has changed the way we learn, work, and spend our time and money in so many ways. Are these things changed forever? COVID-19, 1 year later, continues next. Well, from spaced out classrooms to learning pods to Facebook support groups, school systems have had to scramble to meet the demands of COVID-19. Were these changes positive or negative? And will they last forever? Well, these are things THV 11's Mercedes McKay asked those who experience it every day.
From the certified teachers inside the classrooms.
This has been, to sound really Dickensian about it, it's been the best of times and it's been the worst of times.
To those who became teachers inside their living rooms.
Tragedy is the great equalizer. And so whenever something like this happens, people have to set aside their differences and work together.
The 2020 school year taking a toll on everyone involved.
I think that we'll see some teachers leaving the profession after this year. It has been trying, and it's been emotionally and physically trying for a lot of us.
It's been a lot of weight emotionally. Like, as parents, we have to be able to catch everything on the fly. And if we don't catch on, then our kids suffer.
Father of 5, Richard Tatum, watched his kids struggle with virtual learning, not only academically, but socially.
It was hard for me because my kids are generally happy kids. And we saw some regressive behavior, which really hurt us.
While teachers like Brooke Buckley were spread thin, juggling online and in-person classes.
This year, by implementing a lot of the safety protocols, it's cut into our planning time. So we're being asked to do more with less.
Mask wearing and social distancing are things that may be in the past once COVID is under control, but the ability for students to log on from home may stay for years to come.
It really gave us a glimpse into all the different ways, and it was a nice trial period to figure out what's going to work best in the future.
While there were problems and struggles, educators, parents, and kids found the positives by working as one.
All in all, I will say that I think everybody, our entire community, came together and did what we could the best way we knew how.
Mercedes McKay, THV 11 News.
Doing what they could the best way they knew how. Many teachers have said even though this school year came with a lot of ups and downs, seeing the resiliency of kids shine through, that was their greatest gift. The pandemic has been hard on small businesses and local restaurants, but it's not all bad news in Arkansas. Michael Aaron shows us the struggle and the growing sense of hope.
Small businesses are the heartbeat of a community. For many people, the cashier at their favorite shop and server at their lunch spot.
We have customers that come in every other day, twice a week, 3 times a week.
Are like family.
They've seen my kids grow up here.
Leonardo Alvarez owns Cotija's Mexican Grill in downtown Little Rock.
We just count on lunch hours, lunch crowd to stay open.
The last year has brought more empty tables than ever before.
We're trying to manage.
Forcing the restaurant to evolve. They added curbside and delivery options. Even so, Alvarez has faced a difficult question at times.
How are we going to survive?
And he isn't alone.
Locally owned restaurants took some financial hits in this, and they are going to be struggling at the end of this.
As Arkansas eases out of the pandemic, Rock City Eats publisher Greg Henderson says the restaurant evolution will continue.
I think the hardest thing for restaurants that they're going to have to figure out what happened to consumer behavior. It's not how the restaurants are going to work, it's how consumers are going to change.
Little Rock is known as a local economy. When you look at our restaurants, when you look at our retail opportunities, a lot of those folks are from here.
And many of them have held on, according to Jay Cheshire, president and CEO of the Little Rock Regional Chamber.
We've had less of a negative impact here than in some other parts of the country where everything was completely shut down.
And he says brighter days are ahead.
There is certainly sunshine at the end of this pandemic, whether it be new jobs, new opportunities in the economy, or new opportunities to get back together.
Back together, back to normal. Normalcy that for Alvarez and many others will be met with a sense of gratitude.
We're grateful that God has given us the opportunity to stay open and work, and our customers, they're the best customers that we could ask for.
Michael Aaron, THV 11 News.
Well, eating at a restaurant is what mother and daughter Angela and Summer say they miss right now. They sent us this selfie they took after a Sunday brunch pre-COVID. And Rita sent us this picture enjoying a day at Oaklawn in Hot Springs before COVID restrictions set in. You can text us your pre-COVID memories to 501-376-1111.
It's not something that we ever imagined, especially with my dad, because he was just so full of life.
Put that word out there for my sister. I loved her with all my heart.
The sunlight came in through the cracks in your window, light in your skin, and the scars that only I know.
Sad to say that was the last time I actually got to see him after urgent care.
You are beautiful, and only I know.
She lived 94 beautiful and storied years.
Her motto was, I want to treat people how I want to be treated.
And your hand, it was shaking. You were nervous inside. I could tell, 'cause only I know. You were holding my hand.
1 year into this pandemic, we're all ready for change. We want to plan for the future, a future without a deadly virus. So tonight, we ask, what's next? Teach V11's Rolly Hoyt talks to city leaders about where we go from here.
This has been uncharted waters for all of us. When nobody here has really lived through a pandemic.
Unity, whether you're in the middle of a pandemic or you're not, that's something that's my mission and vision for the city of Little Rock.
The pandemic made us realize that people need people.
And a year later, Arkansans are in a hurry to make those connections again. In the near term, at least in the suburbs like Benton, that's what's next.
People are tired of being boxed in their homes or wherever they might be.
There's impatience farther out from the city, in places like Dardanelle.
Half the people feel like we're going to continue to wear masks for the rest of our life, and the other half are hopeful that we're going to see the end of this and we'll be able to get back to what we knew as normal.
But from a big city hall, a new normal will come down to where we choose to live.
The biggest permanent change for the city is going to be the change in its workforce and how our workforce works more remotely.
Right now, houses are a hot commodity in the city of Benton.
It's a paradox. We want more connection, but we are spreading out, putting pressure to improve those virtual links that come from broadband.
It put a real strain on what we currently had in place. So broadband is going to be a challenge. It's better now.
Let's take those last words to heart. It's better now. Even with the thorny issues, there's momentum to tackle them.
Reform is not a negative. It's accountability, it's alignment, and it helps us all become better, particularly from a community standpoint.
Not a negative. Maybe it's their nature, maybe it's their job, but for these three mayors, after a year of pushing through social unrest, mask arguments, and even the illness itself, they are not negative about what's next.
Each day is an opportunity to focus on how we unite, how we grow and transform with an equity lens at all that we do.
People will be out and about and enjoy life. I just don't know if we'll ever get to the hurry up and rush thing.
It's taught us, I think, to lean on each other a little bit more, even though you can't be close. And it's taught us to care for each other better.
The mayor's looking ahead, and now that leads us to a word that we have heard a lot this year, pivot. Here we go. I got my second COVID shot last week and had an immediate reaction. I was filled with gratitude for the volunteers that you'll find at every vaccination center in our state. People wanting to make the world a safer place any way they can. And when you get your shots, you would think you'd get careless about social distancing. But from what I've seen, the shots make people even more disciplined. That's a good thing, because the one thing we can't pivot from is staying distant and masked. We're still at war with a relentless enemy. But of all the crazy emotions that have surfaced over the last year, there are some new ones now. optimism and hope, which grow with every shot. No predictions from me here, just a message that we are so close to being back together. It's what we human beings are programmed to do. Stay with it, Arkansas. Keep your distance, wear the mask. When it's your turn, get that vaccine. Yeah, the virus is relentless, but so are we. Thank you for joining us here on THV 11. Good night.